There are moments in life when the atmosphere changes before the mind can explain why. You wake up sensing that something is different, yet you cannot quite put your finger on it. The air feels lighter. The tension that has been wrapping itself around your thoughts begins to loosen. A door you did not even realize was locked starts to swing open. This morning carries that kind of energy. While countless people move through their routines without noticing, a profound celestial transition is unfolding behind the scenes. At exactly 8:45 in the morning, the moon leaves the intense waters of Scorpio and steps into the expansive fire of Sagittarius. The instant that shift occurs, an entirely different landscape becomes available. What felt restricted begins to move. What felt trapped begins to breathe. What seemed impossible starts revealing pathways that were hidden only moments before. This is not merely another lunar movement across the zodiac. It marks a threshold, a dividing line between one chapter and the next. The version of yourself that has been carrying the emotional weight of the past several days is approaching a point of release. Whether you realize it yet or not, you are standing at the edge of a personal turning point. What makes this moment so remarkable is how quietly it arrives. There are no alarms. There are no dramatic announcements from the sky. Yet beneath the surface, something undeniable is rearranging itself. If you have recently felt confined by your own circumstances, if your thoughts have become so loud that they seem to echo endlessly inside your mind, if every attempt to find clarity has only led to more questions, there is a reason. None of what you have been experiencing has been accidental. The pressure has been purposeful. The discomfort has been preparing you for something. Later, the deeper meaning behind this experience will become clear. But first, it is important to understand why the previous week felt so extraordinarily intense. Because the opening that arrives today did not appear out of nowhere. It was earned through everything you have already survived. Think back over the last several days. Has it felt as though life has been demanding more from you than you had left to give? Has there been a sensation of being tested from every direction at once? On May 26th, Mars formed a harsh square to Pluto. This was not the kind of transit that quietly passes through the background. It acted like a cosmic pressure chamber. Wherever fear had convinced you to cling to outdated patterns, that grip was challenged. Wherever you had built protective walls around old insecurities, those walls were shaken. The structures you depended on for emotional safety suddenly seemed unstable. Many people found themselves confronting truths they had been avoiding for months or even years. Some watched long-standing assumptions begin to crumble. Others discovered that the strategies they once used to survive were no longer capable of carrying them forward. It was uncomfortable. It was relentless, yet it revealed exactly what needed to be released. Then came May 28th. Just as many people hoped for relief, Venus formed a square to Saturn. If Mars and Pluto exposed issues of power and control, Venus and Saturn brought the heart face to face with reality. This was the moment when emotional fantasies collided with hard truth. Relationships were examined under an unforgiving light. Expectations were measured against reality. Some people encountered rejection. Others experienced emotional distance. Many were forced to acknowledge that certain connections could not provide what they had hoped for. Questions surrounding self-worth, mutual effort, and emotional reciprocity rose to the surface. Saturn rarely delivers its lessons through comfort. Instead, it removes illusion and demands honesty. What remains afterward may feel stark at first, but it is real. And reality, even when painful, is the foundation upon which lasting growth is built. As all of this unfolded, the mind itself offered little refuge. On May 27th, Mercury formed a trioctile to Pluto, a 135-degree aspect known for generating psychological tension and intense mental focus. Suddenly, every unresolved question demanded attention. Every hidden fear seemed louder. Every uncertainty felt impossible to ignore. Many people became trapped in cycles of analysis, examining situations from every possible angle, searching for answers that refused to arrive. Thoughts spiraled. Memories resurfaced. Hidden motivations became impossible to overlook. It felt as though the mind was digging through layers of emotional sediment, uncovering truths buried far beneath conscious awareness. No wonder exhaustion followed. No wonder motivation felt difficult to access. You were not simply dealing with everyday stress. You were moving through an internal transformation process that required enormous emotional and psychological energy. And then, the moon entered Scorpio on May 27th, amplifying everything. Scorpio energy has no interest in superficial solutions. It does not skim across the surface searching for comfort. It dives directly into the deepest layers of human experience. Over the past 3 days, many people have felt submerged within themselves. Emotions became heavier. Old wounds demanded acknowledgement. The atmosphere carried a sense of intensity that could not be ignored. Instead of moving forward with confidence, many found themselves focused on survival. Instead of taking action, they were processing. Instead of chasing goals, they were confronting realities. Scorpio insisted on honesty. It refused to allow denial. It exposed what had been hidden beneath distractions, beneath coping mechanisms, beneath carefully constructed narratives. In many ways, it felt like being pulled into the depths of your own inner world and asked a simple but uncomfortable question. What truth have you been refusing to face? That question has echoed throughout the last several days, setting the stage for the release that is now beginning to emerge as the moon prepares to leave Scorpio behind and step into an entirely new realm of possibility. For days, perhaps without even realizing it, you have been standing before the same invisible question. It has followed you through quiet moments, restless nights, and endless conversations inside your own mind. The question is not about what you need to gain. It is about what you must release. What part of your life has reached its expiration date? What belief, attachment, habit, fear, or identity has become too small for the person you are becoming? Maybe it is a role you have outgrown, but continue performing because it feels familiar. Maybe it is a recurring pattern that once protected you, but now limits your growth. Maybe it is a connection you continue holding on to because letting go feels more frightening than staying stuck. Or perhaps it is the illusion of security itself, a comfort zone that quietly transformed into a cage. Whatever form it has taken, the Scorpio energy of the past several days has refused to let you look away. It has magnified every crack, every contradiction, every hidden truth that demanded acknowledgement. What you have been experiencing is not punishment. It is preparation. It is the final stretch before emergence. It is the pressure that builds beneath the surface just before transformation becomes unavoidable. And now the atmosphere changes. Saturday, May 30th, 2026, at exactly 8:45 in the morning, marks a turning point that deserves your attention. Hold that moment in your memory, because it represents more than a simple lunar movement. Imagine a bow drawn back farther than seems possible, every ounce of tension concentrated into a single point. For days, perhaps weeks, the pressure has been increasing. Every challenge, every emotional confrontation, every uncomfortable realization has added another layer of force. Then suddenly, the release arrives. The arrow is no longer held captive. It flies forward. That is the nature of this transition as the moon leaves Scorpio and enters Sagittarius. This shift does not creep in quietly. It does not announce itself with subtle hints. It arrives with the unmistakable sensation of breaking free. It resembles the moment someone rises from deep water after being submerged for too long and finally fills their lungs with fresh air. The difference between the two signs could not be more dramatic. Scorpio concentrates energy inward. It searches beneath the surface. It investigates motives, wounds, fears, and hidden truths. Sagittarius, by contrast, points toward the horizon. It seeks possibility, meaning, exploration, and freedom. Scorpio asks why the wound exists. Sagittarius asks what wisdom can be carried forward because of it. Scorpio descends into the darkness to uncover truth. Sagittarius takes that truth and carries it into the light. This is why today's energy feels so significant. Many people have been waiting for a change, hoping for a sign that the heaviness would eventually lift. What arrives now may look like luck from the outside, but that interpretation misses the deeper reality. This is not random fortune falling from the sky. This is the reward that follows endurance. This is what happens after you confront the parts of yourself that needed healing. This is what happens after you remain present with challenges instead of running from them. The universe is not handing you an escape route. It is acknowledging that you completed a difficult passage and are now prepared for the next stage. Almost immediately, something begins shifting inside. The emotional density starts dissolving. The mental fog loses its grip. Defenses that once felt necessary suddenly seem unnecessary. The walls you built to protect yourself no longer feel like protection. They feel like obstacles. In their place comes a renewed sense of possibility. Hope begins returning. Optimism starts resurfacing. Clarity replaces confusion. Momentum replaces stagnation. It can feel so dramatic that it resembles stepping into an entirely different version of reality. And that realization matters because you are not the same person who entered this cycle several days ago. The experiences of the past week changed something within you. Whether those changes occurred through heartbreak, disappointment, confrontation, revelation, or deep introspection, they altered your perspective. Now the Sagittarius Moon arrives and presents a choice. What will you do with everything you have learned? This is where the energy becomes especially powerful, because this lunar shift does more than improve the emotional atmosphere. It creates openings. It reveals opportunities that were invisible while you were immersed in Scorpio's intensity. 3 separate avenues of liberation begin emerging. 3 different expressions of forward movement become available. And somewhere within those possibilities, one path is likely resonating with you more strongly than the others. The first path centers on emotional and psychological freedom. This path belongs to those who have been trapped inside their own minds. Those who have spent endless hours replaying conversations, questioning motives, revisiting old disappointments, anticipating future problems, and carrying emotional burdens that no longer serve them. Perhaps you have become so accustomed to vigilance that you forgot what peace feels like. Perhaps your thoughts have been operating like an endless loop, searching for certainty in situations that cannot be controlled. The Sagittarius Moon disrupts that cycle. It introduces a radically different perspective. Instead of gripping tighter, it encourages release. Instead of anticipating danger around every corner, it encourages trust. Not blind trust, but a deeper confidence in your own ability to navigate whatever comes next. The fear that has been dominating your internal landscape begins losing its authority. The stories you have been telling yourself start sounding less convincing. For the first time in a long while, you may notice how exhausting it has been to carry all of that emotional weight. This path is especially significant for anyone who has spent years defining themselves through struggle. For those who became so focused on surviving that they forgot how to experience joy, curiosity, and presence. The invitation arriving today is simple yet profound. Put the burden down. Stop carrying every painful memory as proof of who you are. Stop treating old wounds as permanent identities. Walk forward without dragging the past behind you. And something remarkable happens when you do. Your thoughts become quieter. Your body feels lighter. Your breathing deepens. Energy that was previously consumed by fear becomes available for living. Sagittarius does not merely promise freedom. It reminds you that freedom has been waiting for you all along. The second path unfolds through intellectual expansion and visionary awareness. This path speaks directly to those who have been overwhelmed by details, those who have become so immersed in daily responsibilities, problems, and obligations that they lost sight of the larger journey. Right now, an important dynamic is unfolding in the sky. The Sun and Mercury remain in Gemini, gathering information, asking questions, collecting facts, and examining possibilities from every angle. Across from them, the Moon in Sagittarius performs a different function. Instead of gathering data, it transforms information into meaning. Instead of focusing on individual pieces, it reveals the entire picture. If you have been struggling to understand why recent events unfolded the way they did, this energy may bring a breakthrough. Connections begin forming. Patterns become visible. Lessons reveal themselves. What once appeared chaotic starts making sense. The confusion that clouded your perspective begins to dissolve, and as that fog lifts, an entirely new level of understanding starts to emerge. Then something remarkable happens. Without warning, pieces that once appeared disconnected begin fitting together with surprising precision. The confusion that has been surrounding your circumstances starts dissolving, and what replaces it is not another question, but an answer. A real answer. The kind that lands so deeply within you that there is no need to debate it. Suddenly, the road ahead becomes visible. The lessons hidden inside recent challenges reveal their purpose. The events that felt random begin exposing a larger design that has been operating beneath the surface all along. This is one of the greatest gifts of Sagittarius energy. It elevates your perspective high enough that you can finally see beyond immediate obstacles. For weeks, perhaps even months, your attention may have been consumed by individual problems, isolated frustrations, and unanswered questions. You were looking at separate pieces of a puzzle without understanding the image they formed. Now that image starts emerging. Ideas that seemed trapped in limbo suddenly become practical. Plans that once felt distant become tangible. Decisions that appeared impossibly complicated begin sorting themselves into clear and obvious choices. Many people will experience a powerful realization during this period. That persistent feeling that something needs to change, that inner voice that has been quietly insisting there is another path available, becomes impossible to ignore. What was once uncertainty transforms into conviction. You may find yourself recognizing opportunities that were standing in front of you all along. You may realize that answers you were desperately searching for externally have been waiting within you the entire time. This is the moment when intuition becomes louder than fear. The moment when inner wisdom stops speaking through subtle hints and starts communicating with undeniable clarity. And perhaps the most liberating part of this entire process is what happens to the mind itself. The constant mental tension begins to fade. Endless analysis loses its grip. The exhausting cycle of imagining every possible outcome starts slowing down. Fear no longer dominates every decision. Suspicion no longer colors every interaction. Instead of feeling trapped inside an endless maze of thoughts, you begin experiencing a sense of direction. Think about how much energy has been spent questioning yourself lately. How many hours have been devoted to second-guessing, worrying, replaying conversations, predicting problems, and preparing for scenarios that never arrived? Sagittarius energy cuts through that fog. It replaces hesitation with movement. It replaces confusion with perspective. The mind that once felt like a battlefield becomes something entirely different. It becomes a guide. And once that shift occurs, there is only one direction left to move: forward. This naturally leads into the third pathway now becoming available, a pathway connected to relationships, personal sovereignty, and authentic joy. At first glance, this may sound like another conversation about love, but the truth runs much deeper. The events surrounding the Venus-Saturn square on May 28th were never simply about romance. They were revealing something far more important. They exposed the places where balance had been lost. They illuminated situations where effort was uneven. They highlighted relationships where sacrifice had become one-sided. Most importantly, they revealed the moments when you abandoned your own needs in order to maintain harmony for someone else. That experience was not a punishment. It was preparation. Because the freedom arriving through the Sagittarius Moon extends beyond emotional healing and mental clarity. It reaches directly into your connections with other people. Many individuals spend years believing freedom means finding the perfect relationship. Yet true relational freedom comes from something entirely different. It comes from understanding that your worth is not determined by another person's opinion. Your happiness is not dependent on another person's approval. Your sense of completeness is not created by another person's presence. That realization changes everything. For those who have spent years fearing loneliness, this energy can feel revolutionary. There are people who remain inside draining situations simply because the alternative seems frightening. There are people who tolerate emotional depletion because they believe being alone would hurt more. There are people who confuse attachment with love and dependence with intimacy. The Sagittarius Moon begins rewriting that story. A profound shift occurs within your perspective. Solitude no longer appears threatening. Instead, it begins looking like freedom. Boundaries no longer feel selfish. Instead, they feel healthy and necessary. Self-respect no longer feels negotiable. You start recognizing that relationships built upon genuine connection never require self-abandonment. Real intimacy does not ask you to betray your truth. Authentic companionship does not demand that you shrink your light to make someone else comfortable. And because of that realization, your relationships begin changing naturally. The people who genuinely belong in your life become easier to appreciate because you are no longer holding on to them from fear. You are choosing them from authenticity. The connection becomes cleaner, healthier, and more honest. At the same time, relationships that have already fulfilled their purpose begin drifting away without the dramatic struggles that once accompanied such transitions. The chase ends. The attachment loosens. The need to force outcomes disappears. This is what real relational freedom looks like. It is the ability to care deeply without losing yourself. It is the ability to love without surrendering your identity. It is the ability to remain connected while still honoring your own truth. And just when it seems this transformation has reached its peak, another powerful chapter approaches. Because the shift initiated on May 30th is not the final destination, it is only the opening act. Less than 24 hours later, on May 31st at 4:44 in the evening, the full moon arrives in Sagittarius. Not merely a full moon, but a blue moon, the second full moon occurring within the same calendar month, a phenomenon rare enough to inspire the phrase that has echoed through generations. Events that happen once in a blue moon are remembered precisely because they do not occur often. This blue moon acts like an amplifier. Everything awakened by the Sagittarius moon becomes stronger. Everything revealed during the previous day becomes clearer. Everything seeking completion moves closer to resolution. Full moons have always represented culmination, illumination, and revelation. They bring hidden matters into view. They expose truths that can no longer remain concealed. They complete cycles that have been building for weeks or even months. Yet when that full moon occurs in Sagittarius, the revelations extend beyond everyday concerns. They touch the larger story of your life. Questions about purpose begin demanding answers. Questions about direction begin finding resolution. Questions about meaning become impossible to ignore. Many people will experience startling moments of insight during this period. A decision that has remained unresolved may suddenly become obvious. A recurring pattern may finally reveal itself. A conversation could arrive that permanently alters your perspective. An opportunity could appear that changes the trajectory of your future. Most importantly, you may look back at everything that happened between May 27th and June 1st and recognize that a profound transformation occurred within you. Not because circumstances changed overnight, but because you did. And once that realization arrives, the next chapter begins with a version of yourself that sees the world through entirely different eyes. If everything we have explored so far feels significant, then understand this: the story does not culminate with the Sagittarius full moon. In many ways, that moment functions as a declaration. It is the emotional confirmation that a cycle has truly ended. It is the sky delivering a message that can no longer be misunderstood. The release has happened. The lesson has been learned. The door has opened. What remains is your willingness to walk through it. The energy surrounding this transition carries a very direct invitation. Stop behaving as though you are still trapped inside circumstances that no longer define you. Stop identifying with limitations that have already begun dissolving. Stop carrying burdens that the universe is actively asking you to set down. The freedom emerging now is real, and the challenge is not whether it exists. The challenge is whether you are willing to embrace it. What makes this period even more extraordinary is the larger cycle quietly forming behind the scenes. Many people are viewing the events of May 30th and May 31st as isolated moments of good fortune. They see a powerful lunar shift, a rare blue moon, a surge of optimism, and assume it is simply a temporary energetic high point. But that interpretation misses the larger picture entirely. What is unfolding now is not a brief interruption in an otherwise difficult year. It is the opening chapter of a much greater story. In early June of 2026, Jupiter changes signs. This matters because Jupiter is the ruling planet of Sagittarius. It governs expansion, opportunity, growth, blessings, abundance, faith, and the ability to envision a larger future. Whenever Jupiter changes signs, collective energy shifts. New themes emerge. Different opportunities become available. And this particular transition carries exceptional significance. Jupiter enters Cancer. In traditional astrology, Cancer is the sign where Jupiter is exalted. This means the planet is able to express its qualities with unusual strength and effectiveness. Its expansive nature finds fertile ground. Its gifts become easier to access. Its capacity for growth becomes amplified. The result is an atmosphere that supports emotional fulfillment, personal nourishment, genuine security, and meaningful prosperity. This is why the current Sagittarius activation matters so much. The clarity arriving now is not temporary. The liberation unfolding now is not temporary. The opportunities beginning to appear are not temporary. Instead, they are preparing the foundation for an entirely new cycle that can continue developing throughout the year ahead. Imagine clearing a field before planting seeds. The work of removing rocks, uprooting weeds, and preparing the soil may not appear glamorous, yet it is essential. Without that preparation, future growth cannot occur. The Sagittarius Moon is performing a similar function within your life. It is clearing away outdated fears. It is removing emotional debris. It is exposing beliefs that no longer support your evolution. It is creating space. And what arrives next requires that space. Because Jupiter in Cancer does not reward endless struggle for the sake of struggle. It is not concerned with proving your worth through exhaustion. It is not interested in constant pressure or relentless grinding. Its focus is entirely different. It seeks emotional stability. It seeks meaningful connection. It seeks environments where the soul feels safe enough to flourish. It seeks a version of success that nourishes rather than depletes. This is abundance rooted in well-being. growth rooted in authenticity, expansion rooted in emotional truth. Yet there is an important condition. You cannot fully receive a new chapter while refusing to release the old one. You cannot welcome greater abundance while remaining emotionally attached to scarcity. You cannot embrace a future built on trust while continuing to operate from survival instincts. And this is precisely why the transition occurring right now matters so deeply. The shift is not merely about feeling lighter, it is about becoming different. It is about evolving into the version of yourself capable of sustaining the blessings that are approaching. Many people ask for transformation. Far fewer prepare themselves to hold it. This period is preparation. This period is initiation. This period is recalibration. And because each person's journey is unique, these energies will not manifest identically for everyone. Certain patterns, however, are becoming increasingly visible. If you belong to one of the mutable signs, Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, or Pisces, the impact may feel immediate and unmistakable. For you, the blue moon on May 31st carries unusual intensity. Its influence reaches directly into major areas of life and demands movement. What has been building beneath the surface may finally reach a point where it can no longer remain unresolved. This energy is not subtle. It is decisive. Events connected to identity may reach a turning point. Long-standing questions about who you are and where you are going may finally receive answers. Relationships may arrive at a moment of truth. Connections that have been evolving for months could enter a new phase of commitment, understanding, or completion. Career matters may accelerate unexpectedly. Opportunities, revelations, or decisions that have been delayed may suddenly demand action. Home and family dynamics may also undergo significant developments, bringing long-awaited clarity regarding where you belong and what truly supports your growth. What makes these experiences feel so powerful is that they are rarely isolated incidents. More often, they represent the culmination of a process that has been unfolding quietly for months, and in some cases, even years. The pressure has been building. The lessons have been accumulating. The signs have been appearing. Now the energy reaches a threshold, and when that threshold is crossed, the sensation can feel both overwhelming and liberating at the same time. Because sometimes the breakthrough arrives through a beginning, and sometimes the breakthrough arrives through an ending. Either way, what emerges afterward is the same. More freedom, more truth, more alignment, and most importantly, a clearer understanding of the life you are truly meant to build as the next chapter continues to unfold.